It's time for On Point with Julian Phillips.
Welcome to this edition of On Point. These weeks are going by here, and of course, last week was full of all sorts of stuff in the news, of course, politics, more protests, so on and so forth. But I'm going to focus just on one day, July 17th, 2020. July 17th is very important for those folks who are down for the struggle, as it were, or who are in for the cause of justice and civil rights. Why? Because July 17th, 2020 is the day that two civil rights icons passed away. I'm talking about C.T. Vivian and John Lewis. I first want to talk about C.T. Vivian, a minister. C.T. Vivian may not be known to many people, but he was one of the greatest leaders in the fight for civil rights and justice in this country. He was a lieutenant in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference under Martin Luther King. And Martin Luther King called him, as great as an orator as Martin Luther King was, he called C.T. Vivian the greatest preacher that ever lived. That's huge. And for good reason. C.T. Vivian started off with a sit-in 1947 in Peoria, Illinois. And that moment, that sit-in there, galvanized his entire career and created his legacy. For more than 20 years, C.T. Vivian, not only with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, suffered untold amounts of beatings, arrests, faced hoses from police in the South, dogs. C.T. Vivian was a man who put his life on the line, and not only did he preach nonviolence, he believed in it so much where he said, and I'm paraphrasing, he says, "I believe nonviolence is the only way to deal with discrimination and segregation and racism. Because at the end of the day, if there's any violence, people who are protesting are the only ones that are going to get hurt." In St. Augustine, Florida, C.T. Vivian faced a vicious white mob who almost drowned him. But yet and still, he persevered through that. He wrote books. One book, which was very good, it was the first book on the civil rights movement that was penned by a member of Martin Luther King's staff. He wrote this. It came out in 1970. You got to read this. It's called Black Power and the American Myth. Great reading. He was the instigator, in a good sense, an organizer of many organizations, but one that is known to this day called Upward Bound. Upward Bound was adopted by the U.S. Department of Education to help further the education of people who are poor, people of color, to get their education and achieve college degrees. C.T. Vivian was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, along with John Lewis, not the same year, by President Barack Obama. What I think many people may have forgotten, but what he is remembered for the most, is a march that he led to the county courthouse in Selma, Alabama, in the driving rain in 1965. And he confronted the sheriff there, Jim Clark. And this is what has happened. Take a look at this.
This courthouse in Wake. This courthouse does not belong to Sheriff Clark. This courthouse belongs to the people of Dallas County, and these are the people of Dallas County, and they have come to register. And you know this within your own heart, Sheriff Clark. You're not as evil a man as you act. You know in your heart what is right. You just refuse to do it because you want these people behind you. And as sheriff of this county, if you're deeply concerned, you will go call the registrar rather than keep people from standing inside. What you're really trying to do is intimidate these people, and by making them stand in the raid, keep them from registering to vote. And this is a kind of violation of the Constitution, the violation of the court order, the violation of decent citizenship. You can turn your back on me, but you cannot turn your back upon the idea of justice. You can turn your back now and you can keep the club in your hand, but you cannot beat down justice. And we will register to vote because as citizens of these United States, we have the right to do it.
I'm looking down the line, seeing all the people who've been in jail for felonies. That's what I'm looking at.
Precisely right. And if they're not fit to vote, you'll be able to find that out. But you'll not know it until they're on the register. And many of those have a felony action because Sheriff Clark made them a felony action, not because they were rightfully issued. You don't have to beat us.
Get out of here.
You don't have to beat us. Arrest us.
Get out, man.
Arrest us if we're wrong. Don't beat us. If we're wrong, arrest us, but don't beat us. Stand up.
Come on. Now, clear out of here.
If we're wrong, arrest us. Get into the gospel. If we're wrong, arrest us. If we're wrong, arrest us. Arrest us if we're wrong. Don't push us away. Arrest us if we're wrong. I have the privilege to vote. You beat me in the side and then hide your blow. No, I don't need to leave. We've come to register to vote. You beat us to refuse to register. What kind of people are you? If we're wrong, arrest us. Don't beat us.
He's walking.
It's not a matter of being from the camera. It's a matter of facing your sheriff and facing your judge. We have the right to be in this court. Come on, let's go. We have the right to be in this court. This courtroom belongs to all the citizens of this county. We have the right to be here.
C.T. Vivian confronted power with truth. Truth that was so powerful that Jim Clark, as you saw, had to turn his back on him. Remember that movie, A Few Good Men? It was Tom Cruise that played a lieutenant in the Navy, and he had on trial a Marine colonel played by Jack Nicholson. And the courtroom scene got so intense where Jack Nicholson said, "You can't handle the truth." Jim Clark couldn't handle the truth. And he could only lash out in anger. But C.T. Vivian responded in love. A great, great, great man. John Lewis, many of you know, of course, served 17 terms in Congress. And he was considered by many there the moral compass of the Congress. His career started at a very early age, and his parents were kind of upset about it because he got himself into trouble dealing with fighting for the cause of civil rights. But he called it good trouble, and wisely so. Many remember him standing next to Martin Luther King and speaking at the young age of 23 at the foot of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., at the famous March on Washington. But perhaps many more remember Bloody Sunday, where John Lewis led marchers, 600 across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And they were attacked by police there, and his skull was cracked. But that didn't deter him. 17 years in Congress, and very sincere and forthright, and unapologetic for what he did. He too has passed away. Two giants. The truth. They both presented truth, power. What is the truth? How do we deal with it? There were those who will tell you that the truth may be one thing, and it's not. I grew up believing that Columbus discovered America. I believed it, just like everybody else. Why wouldn't we? Not true. But you'll find some folks today that don't want to accept that as a lie, accept that Christopher Columbus never landed on these shores, that he was responsible for slavery, enslaving people that didn't look like him in the Caribbean, bringing all sorts of diseases that killed untold numbers, wiped out more than half the population of the Indians in the Caribbean. He didn't discover America, but some people think that's true. There's another lie that's been perpetuated when it comes to police brutality. Al Sharpton. Now, many people would say he is an agitator. He makes people uncomfortable. You may not agree with everything that he says. But when it comes to the fight against police brutality, there are those that would have you think that he's anti-police. And many times on record, he said, I'm not anti-police. I'm anti-police brutality. Big difference. Let's fast forward here to the Black Lives Matter movement. A movement that was started back in, I think it was 2013, by people who were upset about brutality against Blacks. I was watching Fox News the other day. I've got to tune into everybody. And I was watching one of the hosts, and he was talking about Black Lives Matter. And he said, oh, well, Black Lives Matter, they're anarchists, basically, and they want to change our way of living here economically. They want to destroy our system, our economic system. Really? I wonder where he got that from. There are many imposters out there, but I've never heard of this. So what I did was I went to the Black Lives Matter website, their official website, and I printed out what they stand for. And it simply says this. Black Lives Matter was founded in 2013 in response to the acquittal of Trayvon Martin's murderer. Black Lives Matter Foundation, Inc. is a global organization in the US, UK, and Canada whose mission is to eradicate white supremacy and build local power to intervene in violence inflicted on Black communities by the state and vigilantes. By combating and countering acts of violence, creating space for Black imagination and innovation, and centering Black joy, we are winning immediate improvements in our lives. We are expansive. It goes on to say we affirm lives of Black, queer, and trans folks, disabled folks, going on and on. We are working for a world where Black lives are no longer systematically targeted for demise. We affirm our humanity, our contributions to the society, and our resilience in the face of deadly oppression. That's what they say. I didn't hear about anything else. I didn't hear about socialism. I didn't hear about economics. I didn't hear about any of those things. So that's what the truth is according to what they say, Black Lives Matter, on their official website. So you have this movement now in the face of oppression. And you have folks that will want to bastardize this or take it over or put their own spin on what they want for themselves. In other words, Blue Lives Matter. Well, they do. But that's not the question here. Furthermore, I don't remember any police back in 1619 being transported over to this country in chains. I don't remember any police being lynched during the Jim Crow and segregation years to the tune of almost 5,000. I don't remember any of that. Blue lives do matter. But we're talking about Black lives and the oppression against Blacks that still exists disproportionately to this day. Dr. A.R. Bernard said it best. I was looking at this on Facebook, and he said this best. There wouldn't be any Black Lives Matter movement if all lives truly mattered. Think about that. What is the truth? Can you handle the truth? C.T. Vivian and John Lewis certainly did. So where do we go from here? Who speaks for truth and justice in this country? What people are going to raise up to carry the mantle and fill a void that perhaps may never be filled? Maybe somebody in the Black Lives Matter movement. Maybe it's somebody else. But usually what happens throughout the course of history, when there's a need, a person or persons are raised up. And boy, do we need that now. We need some sort of unity. We need that cohesion. Last week, I was looking at some video dealing with COVID-19. And I saw at least 3 separate incidences, 2 in New York, one in Queens, New York, in Astoria, Queens, the other in Long Beach, Long Island, New York, and another in Florida. We had these massive parties of young Black youth partying, no masks, drinking, smoking. In the midst of a pandemic. Now, don't get me wrong. There are white folks doing the same thing too. I want to repeat that because I'm not just beating up on our folks, but there are white folks doing that too, young folks doing the same thing. But I'm focusing on our folk. You know why? Because in this era of Black Lives Matter, and you see this, and you know we always stick out more so than anybody else, and you say, oh my God, who have we out there to deal with our young folks who are involved in this behavior? Who do we have out there that tell them how good they are, how proud they should be of their heritage, and how they should be out there doing the right thing, which a lot of them are? Who are our leaders going to be? The passing of C.T. Vivian, Reverend C.T. Vivian, and John Lewis is a big, big loss. Who will be out there to speak truth to power? Who will be out there to tell folks about the truth, which many folk cannot handle? Who will uplift us? Who will guide us? That's the question. I think that's something we all need to think about. But in the midst of wondering who that person or persons may be, today is a day to honor 2 men, 2 giants, 2 legends, 2 icons who stood up for what was right. Good Trouble, and another who said nonviolence is the way, because at the end of the day, if anybody gets hurt, those who are supporting nonviolence are the only ones that are going to get injured. Think about that this week, and I'll see you next week.